Welcome to this very first installment of Tourette's 101. My name is Luca, and on this channel I make weekly videos about what it's really like to live with ADHD and Tourette. My goal is to destigmatize Tourette's through representation and knowledge. Because in order for Tourette to be accepted, it needs to be understood. So that's why I decided to make this series discussing the various aspects of Tourette. This video is aimed at anyone who is interested in learning more about Tourette's. So whether you have it, know someone who has Tourette's, or if you just want to learn more about it, I'm very happy you're here. And I'll be learning alongside with everyone else. Even though there's a lot of information about Tourette's on the internet and in studies, because of my ADHD, I sometimes struggle reading long text. How did I ever graduate university? So if you too prefer to learn through video format, this series is made for you. Of course, all the resources that I use will be in the description below, and if there's anything you'd like me to discuss in the future, or if you have any questions or additional input, leave those in the comments below or send me a message. I'm excited to start, and I hope you are too. In this first episode, we're gonna start at the basics. What is Tourette's? So what is Tourette's? Tourette Syndrome is named after the French neurologist Georges de la Tourette. In 1884, he began his training under Dr. Charcot in the Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. Dr. Charcot asked him to study paroxysmal movement disorders. And this is a type of neurological disorder that's characterized by sudden outbursts of emotion or of action. So this is probably where Gilles de la Tourette first encountered the disorder that we now understand to be Tourette Syndrome. In 1885, when Gilles de la Tourette was only 28 years old, he published an article in the medical journal Archives de Neurologie, in which he describes a bizarre neurological condition that he called a maladie de tic, so literally a tic disease. Gilles de la Tourette thought that this disease had a degenerative cause, where in the people that had it, a nervous system that was weakened by the immoral behaviors of previous generations. That sounds really strange today, but back in the 19th century, it was thought that many diseases and mental disorders were caused by immoral behavior or by wrong deeds or evil spirits. So this maladie de tic was later renamed in honor of Gilles de la Tourette, the man who first described it. This doesn't mean, of course, that in the 19th century people didn't have Tourette's, we just didn't have a name for it. It can even be found in the Malleus Maleficarum, the witch's hammer, where it describes a priest who has vocal tics and motor tics, and this was thought to be caused by witchcraft or the devil. So now we have some history and some background about how Tourette's was first discovered. So what do we know now? After Gilles de la Tourette died, it took the scientific world over half a century to regain interest in Tourette syndrome. However, since then, the study of Tourette has gained traction again, and we now have a far better understanding about the disorder, even though there's still a lot that we don't know. Part 2. What do we know now about Tourette's? We know now that Tourette's is not the only tic disorder out there. In the DSM-5, it's one of 3 tic disorders. The DSM-5 is the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is a book that outlines the criteria of different psychological and psychiatric disorders to help doctors with diagnoses. In order for it to be Tourette's, you have to have at least 2 motor tics, so those are anything to do with movement, and 1 vocal tic, so that's anything that has to do with sound. So those can be words, but also coughing, scraping your throat, something like that. You don't have to have those tics at the same time, and they don't have to be there all of the time. But you do need to have tics for over a year, and you have to have had your first tic before the age of 18. Also, your tics cannot be caused by some other medical condition like seizures, or because of medication, drugs, or alcohol. In this video, I won't go into the details of the diagnostic criteria of Tourette's and the other tic disorders. If that's something you're interested in, let me know and I can make a separate video just for that. An estimated 1 in 100 people have Tourette's, and around half of those people also have varying degrees of other psychiatric disorders, most notably OCD, ADHD, and problems with anger and impulse management. So Tourette's isn't the same for every person that has it. For some people it's just a movement disorder, but it can also be a complex array of motor dysfunction and abnormal behavior. That's why in the current DSM it's described as a developmental neuropsychiatric disorder. We still don't know exactly what causes Tourette's, but we know it's hereditary, so it runs in families. So we know there's some genetic component to it. And by doing brain scans, we have found out that people with Tourette's have slightly different brains than people that don't have Tourette's. And more specifically, there are differences in the areas of the brain that control movement. So most likely, there's an imbalance in the function of brain neurotransmitters. Those are the chemical messengers in the brain that send signals between nerve cells, including dopamine and most likely others as well. There are most likely also environmental factors that come into play when someone develops Tourette's. Environmental factors are things that happen in the environment when the brain is still developing. So, for example, it's found that infections impact the development of Tourette's. There's still a lot we don't know about Tourette's, but we've come a long way understanding what it is and how it works. As research continues, we will continue making new discoveries that will help us in the understanding and treatment of Tourette's. So that brings us to the end of this very first episode of Tourette's 101. If you thought this video was interesting, please leave a like. I make weekly videos about Tourette's and ADHD, some of them more informational like this one and others more lighthearted. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please consider subscribing. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you want me to talk about next. And I want to thank you so much for watching. See you next week. Love you. Bye.